Angelo, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows.
Thank you, George. What a comparison. I think, I was very inspired by just the idea of going to a new land and experiencing, and I think it was, for me, it was just a mind blowing experience, human experience in terms of an approach to a new culture. Also, an introspection into my own culture. I had to go through the whole journey of what actually the collective West should do is actually going back to its roots and just trying to understand itself. As Chinese say, they say, know yourself and know your enemy. The problem with what we have in the collective West is that we still do not understand our own culture. We are actually in a process of deconstruction of Western society, deconstruction of the human being, the identity. We don't know are we a man or woman. We don't know our own history, and at the same time, we want to go 8,000 miles across the sea, and we want to fight China, which has a 4,000 years of history, which has amazing results, which has a different culture, different approach. What China wants is just live and let live. They're focusing China in itself is a word in itself. China is not hegemonic. What the Western world doesn't know is that China, they did the Great Wall because they wanted to be protected by invaders, not to invade. They're not interested in that because Chinese themselves are self-centered. So after so many years in China, you just realize that only Chinese can have an objective view on China because China is so complex. So we have problems of lenses, and we want to shape the world in our own shape. We want to force upon the world. And what we saw recently in the last 6 months, 9 months, a year, since the special military operation, is that 75% of the world was actually waiting for that. Russia was an inspiration for the rest of the world because that's the first country that really not only could stand up to the aggression of the West, this imperialism, but had the means to do that. They could not do to Putin what they did to Gaddafi. What did they do to Gaddafi? They sodomized him. They killed him. Inhumane. A sitting president. To Saddam Hussein, the same.
And they laughed about it. And they laughed.
Sorry?
They killed Saddam Hussein and they killed Gaddafi and they laughed about it.
So what an embarrassment. So what the rest of the world was doing was just waiting for the right time. Now you have Putin that stand up, and guess what? The world is starting to trade in other currencies than the US dollar. Because keep in mind, ultimately, it's not about human rights. It's not about democracy. Ultimately, what we are touching here is the money. What the goal used to say, the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar. So once the collective West loses that right to print endless US dollar to finance their wars, because you can have a budget of $1 trillion a year because you have that privilege. So what is happening right now is that time is in favor on the side of the global south and all the countries that are actually behind Putin and Xi Jinping. And the idea behind this is a multipolar world. It's about non-alignment. It's about live and let live, non-interference into other countries, trying to have actually a more democratic world because it's very fun. You have the collective West that wants to push. They say we want democracy. Well, first of all, in their own societies, people don't believe in their democracy. They know it's a joke. It's a joke. It's an illusion. We have an average of 30-40% that actually believes in own institution. Well, guess what? You go to Russia, you have president that has 80% of support. You go to China, the system, the CPC has 95% of support. And again, very important. This comes from Western institutes or pro-Western institutes. I'm talking about Howard University Institute, MIT. So what is it? Is it the fact that you can put ballots that makes a system legitimate? No, absolutely not. Do you know why? Because we need to go at the root of the issue. It's the rules of the games. This is what the Yellow Vest did in France. They knew that it doesn't matter. The system is rigged. Why? Because the system was written by the elites, the globalist elites that control us. You control the rules of the game, you control the game. I can do it with you, George. Choose any game, let me write the rules. No matter how much you train, I will win because I will write the rules that are going to make me win ultimately. And this is why the Yellow Vest in France, they say, we are going to rewrite the constitution. And this is going to be a constitution written by the people. And we will have actually some system of direct democracy, same as we have in Switzerland, which is actually working very well because it's an educated society. And they have a civic conscience. They're not made. For example, in my country, in Switzerland, I mean, I'm quite proud of the system, but the system that actually works for Swiss, because who they are and at which stage they are and their history, because it's a combined, a political system. It's a combination of where are you at your economic stage, your history. Your level of maturity and so
your
on.
Your culture. Yeah. So as Bob Dylan says, freedom just around the corner for you. But with truth so far away, what good will it do? What good has the so-called freedom to pick between two cheeks of the same backside done for us in Britain or for the Americans in the United States? What good has it done? The proof of the pudding of a system is surely in the eating. And nobody much likes what they're eating in Britain or the United States today.
Exactly, you said it right. You go to Chinese, for example, you talk about freedom and they live like, they open the big, I mean, they'll be like, what? Yeah, well, freedom? I mean, can I eat freedom? Chinese are into tangible stuff. They are realistic. And, ultimately, I give you an example, George. You have money, you have all the freedoms you want. Ultimately it's that, right? You have money, you don't like the place where you live in, Absolutely. You have money, you leave. You can do so much when you have money. What does it do to you if you are homeless in the street of Philadelphia? What do? You have freedom just maybe to breathe. I mean, ultimately it's about...
Well, really you've got freedom to breathe increasingly toxic air. There are things about China that are quite startling. There are many things about China that are breathtakingly impressive. But I saw a story today, maybe you can shed some light on it. A chap was out strolling hand in hand with a woman who was not his wife. And it appeared on Twitter just as a picture of ordinary street life in China. But the man was then identified as a high-ranking Communist Party member and business figure. And within hours, he'd been suspended from the party and the rest. I don't know if it's only because he was holding hands with a young girl that was not his wife, but it's the kind of story that make people in the West sit up and take notice. They think, this is Big Brother gone mad. What do the Chinese think about it?
It always comes back to, does the system needs to please me or please the Chinese? I'm going to be rude here, but sometimes who the F I am, George, to go to China and to let the Chinese people, no matter if I like it or not, does it matter? Chinese need to like the system, and they have a system where actually people have a say in that system. You know what? You know what they do. I'm just going to give you an example. They prevent the dissatisfaction of people. How do they do that? They do tens of thousands of surveys all year long, just to check what the people want, where the people are dissatisfied. In the West, you elect people on promise. They'll tell you what you want to hear, and the problems arise. People say no. We saw it in France. 75% of the people do not want those reform of pensions. Well, we're not going to listen. Why? Because you voted. You voted. Now I have the legitimate right of force. China is not the same. China, they listen to you. They need to be close to the society, and they need to deliver. Because guess what? If you promise you don't deliver, or if you don't do your homework, or if you are corrupt and so on, well, we are going to go into the streets. And believe me, Chinese are not that passive. But if you deliver, I want stability. I want prosperity. That's the culture. They've been through civil wars. It's been a very unstable society. They have 40 years of an amazing, in their history, they've never lived that, and they are regaining what they had lost, its dignity, because we did a humiliation on Chinese. You know what they did in Hong Kong? They were third-grade citizens in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, you had areas of Hong Kong where Chinese had not the right to go. Only white people had the right to go. So finally, they're so happy and they're proud of their society. And who cares? They look at the West, but they're not going to the West and say, well, you should do it like we do and so on. No, well, do what you want. So you're telling me about that system. I'm not familiar with that story, but I will tell you one thing. When it comes to politicians and when it comes to white-collar crime, they go to jail. And when they go to jail, they get hammered because they want to set examples. Now tell me, in the collective West, when was the last time in the US you had politicians going to jail? They don't. They don't. They protect each other. And you know what they do? Because they control the legislative powers, they write the rules of the game and the laws to protect themselves. While the people, we should be writing the rules of the game just to be protected from them. And very often, you see, we have problems with banks, right? Because it's too big to fail and they have too much power, right? So we should write rules to be protected from them, but we give them the right to write the rules. You see how absurd is that? So, and we have legitimate corruption in the West. How do we call it in the West? We call it lobbying. But in China, lobbying is called corruption. I mean, they laugh at you. What is it, lobbying? But in China, we call it corruption. You go to jail for that, and big time. But you see, in China, at least, this is why people, they really respect the system, because the government listens to you, and if there is corruption, they'll go to jail. And they say that you don't have freedom of protest and so on. In China, it's not. China has, it's a continent. They have problems at the local level. If people are unhappy, they go into the street and they get very angry. But there's a quick reaction because the government listen, and usually those problems at the local level. And they get solved. And if they are not solved, because it can happen, there's corruption and so on. Well, the central government comes in and say, well, you got to change that and you got to move, because ultimately what we want is a stable society, stability, harmony, and prosperity. While in the West, it's exactly the opposite. It's a system of divide and control. divide and control. They make, they want to give you the illusion because they associate democracy with chaos. Everybody, it's like, oh, I say that. And what do we do now, especially now, when you notice we are dividing people over societal issues? Who cares? You sexuality, what happens in your bedroom? Who cares? While ultimately what people really want, you wake up in the morning, from morning till evening, you think about one thing. How can I put my kids through education? How can, we can have a stable life? How can I buy a house maybe one day? My health, and those are the important things. So what do we do? You watch the news, and it's all about dividing people. When in reality, we have everything in common. You know what? You are what we call far right, far left, and so on. Well, ultimately, we are human beings. And if you sit around the table, you realize that we share the same thing, same aspiration. See what Chinese say, and they say when it comes to society, and they say it when it comes to Taiwan. Taiwan, they say it's a four letters. It's very common in China. Those are metaphors. They say 九洞圈异. That means look for what unites us and set aside the differences. And this is what they're doing with Taiwan, and they have not done it since 1949. They always say, well, you know what, we have an issue here. That this is a civil war that is unfinished, and it's a Chinese internal issue. And they say, well, you know what, we know we have, this unfinished war. Let's focus on what unites us. What can we do to just to make it work somehow? We have this problem. Let's leave it there. Let's do trade. Let's do exchange. You Taiwanese come to mainland. 2 million Taiwanese, they live in the mainland, and they're very happy. They prosper. Let's do trade. 50% of Taiwan's economy is linked to China. Import and export, 50%. Taiwan is de facto united with China when it comes to economy. And culturally, everything. It's a Chinese society. But what did they do? The collective West came in and they started pouring money into NGOs. They're controlling the media. They started pouring money into political system. They control it. Taiwan is actually it has been hijacked, the same as in 2014 in the Maidan Color Revolution. In Taiwan, they did exactly the same. It was timing. 2014 in Taiwan, there was a sunflower revolution. You know what they had back then? There was an agreement between Taiwan and China, a free trade agreements. But no, you had all those NGOs, all those crazy people came into the street. Oh, we want freedom. China is evil, and so on. And then it's easy. Just follow the money. Who was funding them? Always the same people, George Soros, and
always
criminals.
the same people. Angelo, I could talk to you all night, but alas, the clock moves on. Angelo Giuliano, the Italian Swiss in China. My goodness, China is lucky to have you, and you are lucky to be in China. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.